8-year-old Lily Harper sat stiffly in the polished wooden courtroom chair, her small hands gripping the worn leather leash of her golden retriever, Maple. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and fear, a mix of polished wood and anxious humans. Sunlight streamed in through the tall windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air like tiny specters. Lily's legs swung slightly, unable to touch the floor, and her small boots tapped nervously against the base of the chair. She hadn't spoken in over 6 months. Not to her mother, not to teachers, not even to her friends or anyone. Her silence had become a shield, one she carried like a secret armor, and Maple had become her voice. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Lawyers shuffled papers and whispered strategies to one another. Reporters, cameras, and photographers crowded the back row, lenses clicking and microphones capturing every heartbeat of tension. But Lily only saw Maple's golden eyes staring up at her, calm and knowing, like a tiny lighthouse in a storm of strangers. Every hair on the dog's coat glistened in the light, and every muscle seemed tense, ready to spring into action at a single touch from her. Lily's mother, Elizabeth Harper, sat a few rows back, her hands clasped tightly, knuckles white. She stole glances at her daughter, trying to gauge if she would finally break the silence, but Lily's face remained a mask of concentration and fear. Maple sat obediently at Lily's side, but his ears twitched at every sound, the shuffle of a foot, the squeak of a chair, the soft murmur of a whisper that didn't belong. The dog's tail thumped softly against the floor, a heartbeat syncing with Lily's own. The judge, an older man with graying hair and a voice usually measured and steady, leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. He observed Lily closely, curiosity and concern warring on his face. "Miss Harper," he said gently, "are you ready to proceed?" His voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper. He knew this wasn't a typical case. The courtroom quieted immediately, the reporters leaning in, sensing the tension like static before a storm. Lily's fingers twitched. Her eyes darted to Maple. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsed it countless times in the safety of her room, her backyard, under the watchful gaze of her mother and therapist. She lifted her small hand, brushing Maple's fur lightly. Then, almost imperceptibly, she tapped the dog's paw twice, a secret signal only Maple understood. Maple's ears flicked up, his gaze sharpening, and he rose slightly, the tension coiling through his body like a spring. The prosecutor, a tall, confident man in a crisp gray suit, stepped forward, his polished shoes echoing against the marble floor. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "the child is clearly—" Maple barked sharply, one piercing note that cut through the murmurs like a knife. The courtroom froze. The bailiff shifted uneasily, unsure if the dog was about to attack or misbehave. Lily's mother gasped, but Lily did nothing except glance at Maple, steadying herself. Maple's bark wasn't aggression, it was communication. And suddenly, everyone realized it. The judge leaned forward, brow furrowing. "What is that supposed to mean?" he asked, his tone curious, not accusatory. Maple barked a second time, more insistent this time, stepping closer to Lily, protective and alert. The prosecutor froze, his confidence flickering. His perfectly rehearsed lines seemed useless in the face of a silent girl and her dog, communicating a truth that words could not capture. The audience held its collective breath. Reporters adjusted their cameras, trying to catch every subtle gesture, every twitch of the dog's body. The gallery whispered in low, tense voices, speculation filling the air. But Lily didn't look at anyone. Her eyes were fixed on the witness stand, on the man who had changed the course of her family's life. Maple pressed closer, head tilted, his body radiating alertness and silent command. Lily's mother reached out, fingers hovering over the back of her daughter's chair, desperate to offer comfort without breaking the fragile control Lily had over herself. "It's okay, honey," she whispered, though no sound escaped Lily's lips. Maple seemed to sense the urgency, nuzzling Lily's hand lightly as if to say, "You are not alone. I am with you." The prosecutor swallowed hard, and for the first time a flicker of doubt crossed his face. He glanced at the judge. "Your Honor, the dog." Maple barked a third time, more forcefully, and the judge raised a hand to still the courtroom. The sound echoed off the high ceilings. Every eye was on Lily and her dog. What could a child and a golden retriever possibly communicate that would matter in a courtroom full of lawyers, deputies, and reporters? The question hung like a storm cloud over everyone present. The court stenographer's fingers paused over the keyboard. The air felt thick and charged, every heartbeat amplified in the silent tension. Even the janitor who had been sweeping the floors earlier stopped mid-sweep, glancing curiously at the duo. Lily's fingers brushed Maple's ear, a gesture of reassurance and signal both, and Maple moved closer, his body alert but controlled. Then, almost imperceptibly, Lily leaned slightly forward, her eyes narrowing as if she had seen something that nobody else could. Maple followed her gaze, stiffening instantly. The judge noticed, frowning. "Miss Harper," he said softly, "is the dog trying to tell us something?" The courtroom was silent. The air felt electric. Every reporter's camera lens focused, every deputy's eyes widened, every person leaned forward. The question was simple, but the answer, delivered in two barks and a subtle movement of a paw, was about to upend everything in the room. Lily's mother's breath caught in her throat. The prosecutor's confident composure cracked just enough to reveal anxiety. And Maple, sensing the gravity of the moment, fixed his eyes on the man standing before the court. The dog's stance was unyielding, like a sentinel guarding a secret only he and Lily knew. And then Lily tapped Maple's paw twice more, another secret signal. Maple's tail stiffened, his posture rigid, and he moved a fraction closer to Lily as if saying, "Now is the time. Watch carefully." The judge's eyes widened in shock. "Well, I have never seen anything like this," he admitted, leaning forward over the bench. His gavel hovered in his hand, uncertain whether to pound or wait. The courtroom held its breath, waiting for an explanation that had not yet come in words, only in barks, gestures, and the silent resolve of a girl and her dog. And in that moment, the courtroom realized that what was about to unfold would be anything but ordinary. Lily's secret signal had set a chain of events in motion, one that would leave everyone, even the judge, speechless. The courtroom seemed to shrink around Lily and Maple. Every whisper faded into the background as the girl and her dog became the center of the storm. Maple's golden eyes glinted in the sunlight streaming through the high windows, and his muscles coiled like springs. The judge leaned forward, uncertain, his fingers drumming lightly against the wooden bench. He had seen many unusual situations in his decades on the bench, but a silent child signaling her dog to communicate in court, that was unprecedented. The prosecutor cleared his throat, trying to regain composure, but his voice trembled slightly. "Your Honor, the child, the dog, this is—" A sharp bark interrupted him. Maple's tone was deliberate, commanding. He stepped forward, brushing slightly against Lily's hand, the subtle shift making it clear he was aligned with her. The courtroom gasped at the synchronicity between girl and dog, an unspoken language that only they understood. Lily's mother's face turned pale, a mix of awe and fear. Her daughter, once so silent, was wielding a power no one expected, and the effect was immediate. The judge, eyebrows raised, asked softly, "Miss Harper, is your dog signaling something about the case?" Lily's eyes darted toward the witness stand, then back to Maple. She didn't speak. Instead, she tapped Maple's paw once. Maple's ears shot up, tail stiffening. The dog's gaze locked on the prosecutor, unwavering, a silent accusation that sent a chill through the room. The prosecutor's confident smile faltered, replaced by a nervous twitch in his jaw. He had prepared for cross-examination, for strategy, for arguments, but not this. The courtroom murmurs grew louder. Reporters scribbled furiously, trying to capture every detail. Deputies shifted, unsure if the dog posed a threat. But Maple wasn't aggressive. He was alert, protective, aware of something that no human seemed able to see. Lily's mother leaned forward, whispering in her daughter's ear. "Honey, are you sure?" Lily's hand brushed Maple's golden fur as if to reassure both herself and the dog. Maple's soft nudge felt like an answer. The girl nodded slightly, then tapped his paw again, this time twice. Maple barked sharply twice, the sound slicing through the courtroom. It was precise, purposeful. The judge blinked in disbelief. I have never encountered such behavior," he murmured. "Can someone explain this?" A murmur spread as a woman rose from the back of the courtroom. She was mid-40s, wearing a soft cardigan over a blouse, carrying herself with quiet authority. "Your Honor," she said, stepping toward the bench, "I am Dr. Helena Ross, a certified canine behavior specialist and therapy dog trainer. I was consulted by the Harper family to train Maple in response to Miss Harper's nonverbal cues. The dog has been trained to respond to specific signals indicating distress, fear, or recognition of danger." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. The judge leaned back, adjusting his glasses. "So you are saying this dog is interpreting the child's gestures?" Dr. Ross nodded. "Exactly, Your Honor. And the signals we are seeing now, 2 short barks, indicate that the person in front of her may not be truthful or may be responsible for harm in this case." The prosecutor's face turned pale. He straightened his jacket, lips pressed into a thin line. "Objection, Your Honor, this is absurd. The court cannot accept a dog." Maple barked again, sharply, then stepped a little closer to Lily, his body stiff, eyes locked on the man who had just objected. This time it wasn't just alert, it was insistence, a warning, a subtle threat. He growled softly, the sound low and controlled, yet enough to freeze everyone in their seats. The courtroom went silent. Even the stenographer paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Everyone could feel the tension, the unspoken danger in the air. The reporters' pens froze mid-sentence, cameras raised but unable to capture the invisible thread of fear that had woven itself between child, dog, and man. Elizabeth Harper's hands shook in her lap. She had witnessed her daughter's trauma for months, seen the silent suffering, the nights spent staring at the ceiling, the terror that gripped Lily whenever anyone new approached. She had also witnessed Maple's unwavering loyalty. Now, in this courtroom, that bond was on full display. The judge leaned forward, voice calm but carrying a weight that made the entire room shiver. "Prosecutor, I am asking you, are you prepared to repeat your testimony? Because this dog seems convinced otherwise." The man swallowed hard. "Your Honor, yes, I will repeat it." He cleared his throat, trying to maintain composure, but his confidence had cracked. He recited his statements word for word from earlier, his tone carefully controlled. Every eye in the courtroom followed Maple's reaction. The golden retriever watched, head cocked slightly, muscles tense. Then, without warning, Maple growled low, a subtle but unmistakable sound. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Deputies instinctively shifted closer to the prosecutor, not knowing whether to intervene or wait. Reporters leaned forward, microphones extended, capturing every nuance. The judge raised his hand, signaling silence. "Order in the court," he said, though his voice was tinged with disbelief. "The dog is growling." Dr. Ross stepped forward. "Your Honor, Maple's growl indicates recognition of deceit. The signals from Miss Harper are specific. The child is pointing to the truth. The dog is simply validating what she knows but cannot speak." A shiver ran through the room. The prosecutor's eyes darted toward the gallery, panic creeping in. His hands gripped the edge of the table as sweat began forming along his hairline. He realized, perhaps too late, that this was no ordinary case. Elizabeth Harper's tears slipped down her cheeks. She whispered to herself, voice trembling, "Please, let them see the truth." Lily's hand brushed Maple's fur again. The dog stepped forward, ears pricked, ready to act on the tiny signals that meant so much. The judge's gaze narrowed. "Miss Harper, if the dog is indicating that something is wrong, we need to proceed carefully. Let's make sure we understand what is happening." Lily tapped Maple's paw a final time, 3 quick taps this time, a signal she had never used in public before. Maple's entire posture changed, rigid and alert, ready to defend, ready to reveal, ready to act on the child's command. The judge's breath caught. I want a full explanation before we proceed further." But before Dr. Ross could answer, a deputy noticed something strange. The prosecutor's briefcase, left slightly ajar, had a flash drive partially sticking out, almost like a silent invitation. Maple's gaze shifted ever so slightly toward it, growl rumbling again, ears alert. Every person in the courtroom leaned forward. Something critical was about to be revealed, something no one had expected, something that would change the direction of the case entirely. Lily's fingers trembled around Maple's leash, but she held firm. Maple barked twice more, insistent, urgent, and the courtroom fell into a stunned silence. Reporters paused, deputies froze, the judge's gavel hovered in the air. And in that tense pause, everyone realized the child and her dog were about to reveal a truth that would leave the courtroom reeling. The next moment could shatter carefully constructed lies and expose something no one was ready for. The courtroom felt charged, almost alive, as all eyes remained fixed on Lily and Maple. Every whisper, every shuffle of papers, every clack of a camera shutter seemed insignificant compared to the silent command exchanged between the girl and her dog. Maple stood rigid, chest heaving, muscles taut like coiled springs. The golden retriever's eyes burned with focus, unwavering, protective, attuned to signals no one else could perceive. Lily's hand hovered over his back, trembling slightly but steady enough to maintain their secret communication. The stakes had just escalated, and everyone knew it. Dr. Helena Ross, the canine behavior specialist, stepped forward, her calm demeanor belying the intensity of what she had just witnessed. "Your Honor," she said softly, "Maple's behavior indicates something more than alertness. The child's signals are precise. These are indicators of recognition, fear, and a need to communicate critical information about someone involved in this case." The judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Explain what you mean, doctor. I want to understand this fully." Dr. Ross nodded and adjusted her glasses. Children like Miss Harper who have experienced trauma often develop nonverbal communication methods. In this case, Lily cannot speak the words due to fear or previous threats, but Maple has been trained to interpret her secret cues, taps, gestures, and subtle movements. When she taps his paw twice, it's not random. It signals suspicion or danger associated with a person. Gasps swept across the courtroom. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Sweat beaded along his temple. For a moment, the courtroom fell silent, all attention on the man who had been so confident just minutes earlier. The judge adjusted his gavel, uncertain whether to proceed or pause. "You're saying the dog is interpreting the child's perception of truth?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor. And the fact that Maple has responded multiple times to the prosecutor indicates that Lily may be signaling that he is not truthful, or worse, that he may have had a direct role in the incident that brought her here," Dr. Ross explained. The prosecutor's hands trembled slightly, fingers pressing against the edge of the table. His voice cracked as he attempted to regain authority. "Objection! This is absurd. You cannot let a dog dictate the truth of a legal case." Maple growled low, deliberate, right at him. The sound resonated through the wooden panels, a warning and a statement of fact that no one could ignore. Deputies shifted uncomfortably. Even the reporters, accustomed to sensational stories, leaned in, aware they were witnessing something extraordinary. Elizabeth Harper's hands shook and tears welled in her eyes. She had witnessed her daughter's trauma, the nights she cried silently, the terror in her eyes at strange noises, the way she recoiled from anyone unfamiliar. But she had also seen Lily's courage, the quiet power of her bond with Maple. That bond was now on full display, commanding the room in a way that words never could. The judge looked directly at Lily. "Miss Harper, if your dog is indicating that this man is not telling the truth, I want to give you a chance to show us. You can use your signals." Lily's eyes locked on Maple. Slowly, deliberately, she tapped his paw twice, the signal she had been practicing in secret for months. Maple stiffened, his gaze now fixed entirely on the prosecutor. His tail was rigid, ears pricked, body tense. Every muscle communicated vigilance, alertness, a readiness to protect and reveal the truth. The prosecutor swallowed hard. His confident exterior was crumbling. He glanced at his notes, then at the defense attorney, whose face had transformed from surprise to intense curiosity. There was no escaping the implications of what Lily and Maple were showing. Dr. Ross cleared her throat. "Your Honor, this behavior is not random. It is trained, precise, and meaningful. Maple's reactions indicate that Lily is signaling that she recognizes deceit or danger associated with the prosecutor." The judge's hands gripped the edges of the bench. "Very well," he said carefully. "We will proceed cautiously, but the court needs concrete evidence, and a dog's behavior alone is not enough. We need something more." Just as he spoke, the defense attorney rose, holding a folder tightly in his hand. His movements were deliberate, cautious, like someone walking on a thin line of danger. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady, "we have evidence that was not disclosed by the prosecution, which may prove what Miss Harper's signals are indicating." A murmur of shock rippled through the courtroom. The judge's brow furrowed. "Evidence that was withheld, explain." The defense attorney opened the folder. Photographs, text messages, and audio recordings spilled out, carefully cataloged with dates and timestamps. The room seemed to tilt slightly as the documents were handed to the judge. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present. Elizabeth Harper gasped softly, clutching the edge of her chair. Lily's hands trembled over Maple's back, but she kept her eyes on the prosecutor. Maple's ears twitched at every shift of the man's body, every micro-expression, every flicker of panic in his eyes. The dog's growl was low but insistent, a deep rumble that vibrated through the room like a warning drumbeat. The judge examined the documents quickly, flipping through each page, his face tightening with tension. The first photographs showed the aftermath of the night Lily had been threatened, the street outside her home, footprints, and evidence that had never been mentioned in testimony. The text messages revealed conversations between the prosecutor and a third party, suggesting manipulation of events. The audio recordings captured voices and statements omitted from the official record. The prosecutor's hands trembled, papers slipping from his fingers. His confident composure was shattered, replaced by fear, panic, and desperation. He glanced at the defense attorney, then at the judge, then at Lily, who remained silent yet resolute. Maple barked twice, sharp, deliberate, in perfect unison with Lily's small, almost imperceptible paw taps. The courtroom collectively froze, recognizing the gravity of the signals. Dr. Ross whispered softly to the judge, "Your Honor, Maple's behavior confirms what this evidence shows. Lily is pointing to the truth, something the prosecution hoped to conceal." The judge leaned back in his chair, breathing heavily, eyes wide. This is highly irregular," he murmured. "But the evidence, coupled with the child and the dog's signals, cannot be ignored. The court will need to examine everything carefully, and further proceedings will be adjusted accordingly." The prosecutor's face drained of color. "This is impossible. You can't, this is," he stammered, unable to finish the sentence. His usual arrogance had evaporated, leaving only raw fear. Lily's hand brushed Maple's ear lightly. He nudged her gently, as if to say, "Stay calm. We're almost there." The courtroom hung on every tiny interaction, the unspoken language of trust and recognition between child and dog. Every eye followed the golden retriever's movements, every heartbeat synchronized with the tension in the room. Then Lily tapped Maple's paw 3 times, a signal she had never used publicly, one she reserved for absolute certainty and critical moments. Maple stiffened instantly, his posture now rigid, defensive, commanding attention. The judge leaned forward, his gavel suspended in midair. Even the stenographer paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The room was filled with an electric silence, everyone aware that something monumental was about to unfold. The evidence, The signals and the growing panic of the prosecutor created a pressure so thick it was almost tangible. Everyone sensed it. The courtroom was on the edge of a revelation, one that would not just influence the case, but shatter carefully maintained facades, exposing hidden truths that no one wanted to see. Elizabeth Harper clutched Lily's shoulders, whispering a trembling prayer. Lily's eyes glistened with tears and Maple pressed closer, a reassuring presence. They were ready, though none in the room knew exactly what would happen next. And then Maple barked once more, sharp, commanding, undeniable, and the courtroom held its collective breath, waiting for the moment that would finally expose the hidden truth behind Lily's silence. The courtroom seemed to vibrate with anticipation, the kind that makes every whisper louder and every movement feel magnified. Lily's small hand rested on Maple's back, gripping the leash tightly, but her gaze never wavered from the prosecutor. Maple's golden eyes followed her every micro-gesture, muscles coiled, tail stiff, alert to the slightest twitch of the man's body. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and fear, an almost electric charge that held everyone's attention captive. The defense attorney's hands trembled slightly as he opened the folder containing evidence the prosecution had never disclosed. He held it deliberately, like a prize, a revelation that had been kept hidden until the perfect moment. Photographs fell onto the desk, images of the night of the incident, blurry at first, but with careful observation, each captured a detail no one had noticed. The shadow of a man near Lily's home, footprints that didn't match anyone previously questioned, and the faint outline of a vehicle partially hidden by a fence. The judge leaned forward, squinting at the images. "Where did this come from?" he asked, voice low, tinged with disbelief. "These were obtained independently, Your Honor," the defense attorney explained, glancing briefly at Lily. "And the audio recordings confirm that what Miss Harper's signals have indicated is accurate. The person she is concerned about is involved in the attempted assault she endured, someone who has tried to manipulate the case for personal gain." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. The prosecutor's jaw tightened, his hands clutching the edge of the table, knuckles white. Beads of sweat dotted his temple. His confident posture had eroded under the weight of the unseen evidence, the dog's unwavering attention, and the girl's silent determination. He had rehearsed this case endlessly, relying on selective testimony and omitted facts, but now every hidden truth threatened to unravel his carefully constructed narrative. Maple pressed closer to Lily, his tail stiff, ears alert, growling softly under his breath. The defense attorney handed a USB drive to the court clerk, who plugged it into the courtroom monitor. The overhead screen flickered, then illuminated with video footage that instantly froze everyone in place. The footage showed the street outside Lily's home the night of the attempted abduction. A figure lurked in the shadows, the hood of a jacket concealing the face, but the movements, posture, and subtle features made it clear to anyone paying attention who it was. The camera panned slightly, capturing the glint of metal in the hand of the figure, something small, threatening, yet unmistakable. The judge leaned in closer, squinting, unable to believe what he was seeing. The prosecutor froze. His composure shattered as the defense attorney continued. "Your Honor, this video shows the individual attempting to manipulate the circumstances to frame Miss Harper's father. Evidence, communication, and omissions were all coordinated to create a false narrative in this courtroom." The courtroom was silent, all attention riveted on the screen. The reporters' cameras clicked furiously, capturing every reaction. Deputies instinctively shifted closer to the prosecutor, unsure how he might respond. But Maple didn't move. He simply stood beside Lily, steady, unwavering, a silent guardian. The dog's growl had evolved into a low, controlled rumble, a warning to the prosecutor that the truth was finally catching up. Elizabeth Harper's hands shook. She clutched the edge of her chair, pressing her face into her palm as tears slipped down her cheeks. Her daughter had endured months of silent terror, sleepless nights, and constant fear. And yet, here she was, silently commanding the attention of a courtroom full of adults, exposing the danger that had haunted them all. The judge cleared his throat. "Prosecutor, step forward," he said, voice firm. "This evidence is damning. Do you wish to respond?" The man's face was pale, his lips pressed tightly together. He shifted nervously, glancing at the deputies, the defense attorney, and then at Lily. Maple barked twice, sharp, deliberate, then fixed his eyes on the man. Every observer could feel the intensity in that golden gaze, the silent accusation that spoke louder than any words could. The prosecutor's hand shook as he rose. "Your Honor, this is—" His voice faltered, the rehearsed speech he had prepared over weeks crumbling under the weight of undeniable evidence. He swallowed hard, beads of sweat rolling down his temple. I can explain." Maple growled, low and insistent, a deep warning that silenced the man instantly. He didn't dare continue. The dog's stance was clear. Lily's truth was not negotiable, and any attempt to manipulate it further would be met with resistance. The courtroom held its collective breath, every eye on the silent child and her loyal guardian. Lily's small hand rested on Maple's back. She tapped his paw once, a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture, but Maple stiffened instantly, responding to her signal with immediate understanding. This time the dog stepped slightly toward the prosecutor, a controlled movement that radiated authority. The message was clear. Any attempt to lie or mislead would be seen, confronted, and exposed. The judge's gavel hovered midair. "Deputies, ensure he remains seated," he ordered quietly, though the tone of command was unmistakable. The men shifted slightly, flanking the prosecutor without alarming the child or the dog. The tension was thick, palpable, like the moments before a storm breaks. Dr. Ross stepped forward, explaining once again, "Your Honor, Maple has been trained extensively to respond to Miss Harper's cues. These signals are precise. When she taps twice, it indicates recognition of deceit or danger. The prosecutor has now demonstrated behavior consistent with that danger, and the evidence confirms it." The judge's eyes narrowed. He exhaled slowly, absorbing the reality of the situation. This is extraordinary. I have never presided over anything like this in my career." Maple barked again, two short, sharp barks directed at the prosecutor. The sound resonated through the courtroom, commanding attention, demanding accountability. The prosecutor's confident veneer had evaporated completely. He shifted in his chair, hands clutching the table, unable to meet the eyes of the girl who had exposed his deception without uttering a word. Elizabeth Harper's tears flowed freely. She whispered softly to herself, a prayer of gratitude. "Thank you, Maple. Thank you, Lily." The defense attorney motioned toward the judge. "Your Honor, with the evidence now presented and the dog's behavior confirming the signals, we request an immediate review of all testimony provided by the prosecution, as well as an evaluation of any omitted material." The judge's voice was steady but firm. "Agreed. We will pause proceedings momentarily to assess this evidence thoroughly. But I must say, the behavior of this dog, and the child's ability to communicate with him, has now become central to the integrity of this case." The prosecutor's breathing grew rapid. He glanced nervously at the exit, his posture signaling the panic rising within him. He knew the moment of reckoning had arrived. Maple, sensing the shift, leaned slightly into Lily, protective yet poised. The golden retriever's gaze never left the man, silent but powerful. Lily's hand brushed his fur, steadying herself. She had revealed the truth in a language only Maple understood, and the courtroom had been forced to listen. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Every reporter held their breath. Every deputy, every lawyer, every observer was caught in the gravity of the moment. Lily's signals, Maple's responses, and the newly presented evidence had created a perfect storm of revelation and suspense. And then, as if on cue, Maple barked a final time, 3 short, deliberate barks. The judge froze, leaning over his bench. Every person in the courtroom instinctively leaned forward, waiting. knowing that the next moments would shatter lies, expose deception, and reveal truths no one had expected. The silence was absolute, heavy with anticipation. Everyone knew the courtroom was about to witness something extraordinary, something that would change the course of the case forever. The courtroom seemed suspended in time. Every eye was locked on Lily and Maple. The golden retriever sat rigid beside her, ears twitching at every twitch of the prosecutor's body, every sudden murmur in the room. The judge leaned forward, fingers intertwined on the bench, watching the girl with a mixture of curiosity and concern. This silent child, who had not spoken for months, had just commanded a courtroom with nothing more than subtle gestures and the cooperation of her dog. The atmosphere was electric, thick with tension, like the calm before a storm. Elizabeth Harper gripped her daughter's chair, her knuckles white, trying to steady herself as her mind raced through the months of fear, sleepless nights, and unanswered questions. She had watched Lily retreat into silence after that terrifying night, the night someone had tried to pull her into a van just outside their home. Every time the memory resurfaced, Lily's body had frozen, her lips sealed by terror, and Maple had been the only constant, the sole guardian who could translate her unspoken fear into action. Now in the courtroom, that silent history had become visible, undeniable. Maple's gaze remained fixed on the prosecutor, golden eyes blazing with alertness and understanding, perfectly attuned to Lily's subtle cues. The dog's low growl rumbled through the room like a warning, a soft vibration that seemed to reach everyone in their seats. The prosecutor's confident posture was completely gone. He shifted uneasily, sweat beading at his hairline. The facade he had maintained for months crumbled with every bark, every growl, every subtle paw tap from Lily. He had counted on careful words, hidden evidence, and manipulation, but none of that mattered against a girl and her dog who communicated in a language of truth, loyalty, and instinct. Lily's small hand trembled slightly as it rested on Maple's back. She had rehearsed this moment in private countless times, but the reality of standing in a courtroom full of strangers made her pulse hammer in her ears. She inhaled sharply, feeling the memory rise from the depths of her mind, the shadowy figure that had tried to abduct her, the fear that had silenced her for months, and the instant connection she had shared with Maple when he had saved her. Maple nudged her gently, sensing her hesitation. The dog's presence was more than comfort. It was a bridge between her silence and the revelation the courtroom needed to witness. Lily's eyes, wide and glistening with tears, focused on the prosecutor. She raised her hand slightly and tapped Maple's paw once, then twice. The barks came almost instantly, sharp, deliberate, and perfectly synchronized with her signals. The judge's voice trembled slightly as he addressed the prosecutor. "Sir, do you recognize the significance of these actions? The child and her dog are indicating, correctly, it appears, that you have misrepresented events. Is that correct?" The prosecutor's lips parted, then pressed tightly together. He glanced at his briefcase, then at the defense attorney, then at the gallery filled with reporters and spectators. For the first time, his carefully constructed composure failed entirely. I, he began, then faltered, his words trapped by the room's intensity and the unyielding focus of a dog and child who could not be intimidated. Dr. Ross, the canine behavior expert, stepped closer to the judge. "Your Honor, Maple is not just responding to instinct. He is trained, precise, and intelligent. The two-bark signal Miss Harper just sent indicates danger, recognition, and the presence of deceit. The child is pointing directly to the individual responsible for her trauma." The courtroom gasped. Every reporter's pen hovered mid-sentence, cameras capturing the moment, deputies leaning forward, tension radiating from the judge. The prosecutor swallowed hard, his face pale, his hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles were white. He realized finally that he had been exposed, unmasked in front of everyone. Lily's mother whispered softly to herself, tears streaming down her face. "Please, let them see the truth." The judge motioned for Lily to continue her signals. The girl hesitated for a fraction of a second, then tapped Maple's paw 3 times, a sequence reserved for absolute certainty, a signal she had never used publicly. Maple stiffened instantly, muscles coiled, and he stepped slightly forward, eyes locked on the prosecutor. The room was silent, every heartbeat audible in the tension-filled space. Elizabeth Harper's hands trembled as she gripped the chair. She knew this moment was critical. For months, she had feared that Lily's trauma would remain hidden, unspoken, unacknowledged. But now, the child was revealing her memory piece by piece, using her only ally, Maple, to translate fear into undeniable communication. The defense attorney moved carefully, reaching for a folder containing additional evidence, a collection of photographs, timestamps, and partial recordings that the prosecution had neglected to submit. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady but urgent, "this material directly correlates with the signals Miss Harper has been sending to her dog. It confirms the attempted abduction and the deliberate omission of information designed to frame her father." The judge's eyes widened as he leaned forward, examining the documents. He motioned for the courtroom technician to bring up digital copies on the screen. When the images appeared, gasps echoed through the room. Shadowy figures, poorly concealed but unmistakably matching the description of the prosecutor, moved near Lily's home on the night of the attempted abduction. Text messages and partial audio clips were displayed alongside the photos, revealing deliberate manipulation, selective omission, and attempts to mislead the court. The prosecutor's face drained of color. He tried to rise, but Maple's low, deliberate growl pinned him in place. Every eye in the courtroom was on the duo child and dog, whose silent communication had revealed what had remained hidden for months. Elizabeth Harper buried her face in her hands, overwhelmed with emotion. She had witnessed the trauma, the fear, and now the justice beginning to unfold. Lily's lips quivered, and for a moment it seemed she might speak. But the memory of that night, the terror of the abduction attempt, still held her voice hostage. Maple pressed closer to Lily, reassuring and alert. His tail thumped gently against the polished floor, a reminder that she was not alone. With a trembling hand, Lily scribbled something quickly onto a notepad, the only way she could communicate directly without speaking. She handed it to the defense attorney, whose eyes widened as he read the single name written in shaky letters. It was the prosecutor's name. The courtroom erupted into murmurs. Deputies shifted uncomfortably, reporters whispered feverishly, and the judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Maple barked again, 2 sharp barks that echoed with urgency and recognition. Every person in the room understood immediately. The child had identified the perpetrator. The dog's reaction confirmed her message. The prosecutor's confident facade crumbled completely. Sweat rolled down his temples, his hands shook uncontrollably, and his mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came. He realized that the secret signals of a child and her loyal dog had exposed him in a way he had never anticipated. Elizabeth Harper sobbed quietly, her hands shaking. She had feared for her daughter's safety, feared that the trauma would remain unspoken and unacknowledged, feared that no one would believe the truth. But now, months of silence, fear, and preparation were vindicated. Lily had communicated her truth through gestures, signals, and the unwavering loyalty of Maple. The judge lowered his gavel, his voice steady but filled with gravity. This court has witnessed something extraordinary. The signals of a child and the responses of her trained dog have highlighted critical truths that must be addressed immediately. Deputies, ensure the prosecutor remains seated and secure. We will review the evidence thoroughly, and proceedings will continue under these extraordinary circumstances. Maple pressed his head gently into Lily's hand, a silent reassurance. The girl's eyes glistened with tears, and for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of relief. The courtroom had recognized her truth. But as the prosecutor sat frozen, a thought crossed everyone's minds. The revelations were far from over. The signals, the evidence, and the child's memory were just the beginning. The story was about to reach a climax that no one, not even the judge, could have anticipated. And in that charged silence, Lily tapped Maple's paw one last time, a signal that would set the stage for the next revelation, and for justice to finally unfold. The courtroom erupted into chaos almost instantly. Whispers cascaded into shouts. Cameras flashed relentlessly. Reporters scrambled to capture every detail, and deputies instinctively moved closer to the prosecutor, who now sat frozen in his chair, pale and sweating. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made every heartbeat feel amplified, every breath loud in the heavy silence. All eyes were on Lily and Maple, the small child and her golden retriever, whose silent communication had just unraveled a man's carefully constructed deception. Lily sat rigid, gripping Maple's leash tightly. The dog's golden eyes were locked on the prosecutor, ears pricked, growl low but firm, a warning to anyone who might try to interfere. His tail stiffened like a lever, every muscle taut, radiating vigilance and authority. The judge banged his gavel lightly, trying to restore order, but even he struggled against the storm of energy that had overtaken the courtroom. "Order," the judge called, though his voice was strained. "Order in the court. Everyone take your seats. This is extraordinary, but we must proceed methodically." The prosecutor's hands shook violently. He tried to rise, to argue, to regain some semblance of control, but Maple's growl stopped him in his tracks. The dog's posture was immovable, unwavering, as if declaring that any attempt to manipulate, escape, or deny the truth would be met with immediate scrutiny. The man's eyes flicked nervously around the room, searching for an ally, a way out, but everyone was watching, waiting, understanding that the child and her dog now dictated the room's pace. Elizabeth Harper buried her face in her hands, sobbing softly. Months of worry, sleepless nights, and unanswered questions had brought her here. She had feared that Lily's silence would allow injustice to prevail, that her daughter's trauma would remain invisible. But now, the child's courage and Maple's training had forced the truth into the open, undeniable and unignorable. The judge, leaning forward over the bench, spoke quietly but with authority. "Prosecutor, this court has seen extraordinary evidence and behavior. We are reviewing withheld documents, photographs, audio recordings, and, importantly, the child's communications with her dog. You will remain seated while this process continues." The prosecutor's hands gripped the table tightly, his knuckles white. This is nonsense. You cannot, this is not legal." His voice cracked, betraying desperation. He glanced at the defense attorney, at reporters at the gallery, and finally at Lily and Maple, as if searching for a miracle. But no miracle would come. The child's signals and the dog's responses had revealed everything. Maple barked sharply, 2 precise barks, then stepped slightly forward. Every muscle in his body radiated authority, and the courtroom seemed to collectively hold its breath. The growl that followed was low, controlled, and deliberate, sending a shiver through the gallery. Even the most seasoned reporters leaned forward instinctively, captivated by the raw, undeniable power of the unspoken communication. Lily tapped Maple's paw once, then twice, a signal she had only used when the truth was urgent and undeniable. Maple stiffened, barking twice again, his gaze locked on the man who had caused her so much fear. The dog's intensity radiated like a force field, creating a psychological barrier the prosecutor dared not cross. The judge motioned toward Dr. Ross. "Doctor, explain to the court exactly what these behaviors indicate." Dr. Ross stepped forward. "Your Honor, Maple is responding to precise signals from Miss Harper. The 2-bark sequence she just issued indicates that she recognizes a person as deceitful or dangerous. The child has been trained to communicate her fear, her recognition of events, and her understanding of threat through these signals. The dog's behavior is consistent with that training and reinforces the accuracy of her perception." The courtroom gasped again. Reporters scribbled frantically, deputies exchanged uneasy glances, and the judge's expression darkened, a mixture of shock and awe. The prosecutor's jaw trembled, his words caught somewhere between panic and denial. Elizabeth Harper whispered to herself, voice trembling, "Yes, show them the truth." The defense attorney moved carefully, placing another folder on the desk before the judge. "Your Honor, these documents, photographs, text messages, and audio files directly corroborate what Miss Harper has been signaling. They reveal deliberate manipulation, omission of key evidence, and attempts to mislead the court regarding the events leading to the child's trauma." The judge adjusted his glasses and reviewed the materials, then gestured toward the monitor. The footage flickered to life on the screen. Shadows moved along the street outside Lily's home. Figures lurked near the driveway. Partial images of a vehicle appeared, obscured but identifiable. The audio recordings contained threatening voices, muffled commands, and attempts to create a false narrative. The pieces of the puzzle aligned perfectly with Lily's silent cues and Maple's unwavering vigilance. The prosecutor's face was ashen. He tried to speak, but Maple's low, controlled growl stopped him again. The room was silent, every observer aware that the child and her dog had seized control of the courtroom narrative. Words were no longer the authority. Signals, instinct, and truth were. The judge leaned back, exhaling slowly. This is unprecedented," he murmured. "The court is witnessing a combination of evidence and behavior I have never seen before. The child has communicated the truth through signals, and the dog has corroborated them. We will need to review all testimony and evidence carefully, but the direction is clear." Maple's gaze never left the prosecutor. Every movement, every tremor in the man's body was noted by the dog. The growl softened slightly, almost contemplative, but the warning remained. Lily tapped Maple's paw again, 3 times, her most urgent signal. Maple stiffened, barked sharply, and leaned slightly into her, protective and commanding simultaneously. The courtroom leaned forward in unison. Everyone understood. The final confrontation was approaching. The evidence, the child's signals, and the dog's behavior had converged to reveal an irrefutable truth. The prosecutor's panic was now palpable, raw, uncontainable. Elizabeth Harper squeezed Lily's shoulders, whispering, "It's okay, you're safe now, you did it." The judge banged his gavel, trying to restore order. "All rise," he instructed, but no one moved. The collective focus of the courtroom remained on the small girl and her dog. Every heartbeat, every flicker of motion, every soft bark carried weight. The child had communicated months of fear and hidden knowledge in silence, and Maple had made sure the world listened. Then Lily scribbled a single note and handed it to the defense attorney. He read it aloud. "He did it, he lied, he tried to hurt me." The room went dead silent. Every observer froze. Maple barked twice in confirmation, tail stiff, muscles taut, eyes blazing. The prosecutor sank further into his chair, pale and sweating, realizing that the child's silent communication and the dog's instinct had exposed him beyond any possible denial. The judge exhaled, leaning heavily over his bench. "This court will not ignore what has just been revealed. We are proceeding immediately with the investigation and verification of this evidence. The child's signals and the dog's responses have made one thing abundantly clear. The truth cannot be hidden any longer." Maple pressed gently into Lily, and she rested her head against his fur, drawing strength from his presence. The room remained tense, but for the first time, a sense of hope flickered among those who had been rooting for justice. But everyone knew, the story was far from over. The revelations, the evidence, and the silent courage of a child and her dog were building toward a climax no one in the courtroom could yet imagine. The next moments would decide the fate of the prosecutor and finally bring Lily's torment into the light. And as the gavel hovered above the bench, the courtroom braced itself for the confrontation that would change everything, an encounter that no one, not even the judge, would ever forget. The courtroom was electric with anticipation, every spectator, lawyer, and deputy holding their breath. The evidence had been laid bare. Lily's silent signals, amplified through Maple's unwavering vigilance, had exposed the hidden truths no one could deny. The prosecutor sat frozen, hands gripping the edge of the table, pale and trembling, the sheen of sweat reflecting the harsh overhead lights. He had rehearsed defenses, perfected lies, and cultivated confidence for months, but none of that mattered now. The courtroom had witnessed the raw power of truth communicated in silence. Maple's gaze remained fixed, unblinking on the man who had attempted to manipulate events, distort reality, and instill fear in a small child. Every muscle in the golden retriever's body radiated authority and alertness. A low growl emanated from him, almost vibrating through the polished wooden floors, a sound that resonated with undeniable warning. He was not just protecting Lily, he was demanding accountability. Lily's small hand trembled slightly as it rested on Maple's back. Her eyes, wide and glistening, did not waver. She had endured months of terror, of silence, of trying to navigate a world where the adults she trusted had failed to protect her. But now, standing in the courtroom, she felt a strength she had never felt before. Maple's presence anchored her, translating the silent courage she had harbored into an unyielding statement of truth. The judge leaned forward, voice measured but firm. "Prosecutor, the evidence presented, coupled with the child's signals and the dog's responses, indicates serious misconduct, manipulation, and possible endangerment of a minor. You are required to respond fully and truthfully to this court, starting with your presence during the review of the newly submitted evidence." The man's lips parted, then pressed tightly together. His eyes darted to the gallery, to the deputies, then back at the child whose silence had undone him. "Your Honor, I," his voice faltered, trembling under the weight of exposure. Words, carefully rehearsed, seemed to vanish into the tense air of the courtroom. Maple barked sharply twice, as if to punctuate the point. His posture was rigid, muscles taut, every fiber alert, signaling both warning and validation of Lily's silent accusations. The courtroom went silent, the effect almost hypnotic. Even the stenographer paused mid-typing, aware that the dog's signals carried more weight than words. Dr. Ross, stepping forward once more, explained calmly, "Your Honor, Maple's behavior is consistent with training and instinct. He is recognizing deceit and danger. The two-bark sequence the child just sent confirms that the prosecutor is not being truthful and that the child's recognition of risk was accurate." The judge rubbed his temples, exhaling slowly. "I have never seen anything like this. A child's silent communication, validated by a trained animal, has led us to evidence that was intentionally hidden. The gravity of this situation is extraordinary." The defense attorney rose, laying out additional documents, text messages, financial transactions, and audio recordings that revealed attempts to manipulate witnesses, suppress evidence, and create a false narrative framing Lily's father. The room collectively leaned forward, eyes wide with disbelief. The prosecutor's panic intensified, his confident facade reduced to raw fear. Maple growled low again, a deep, resonant warning. The dog's gaze was unwavering, fixed on the man, each muscle in his golden frame communicating vigilance and insistence. Lily tapped Maple's paw once, then twice, her most urgent signals, reserved for moments of absolute certainty. Maple responded instantly, barking sharply and taking a step closer, a silent declaration that the child's judgment was to be respected and trusted. Elizabeth Harper covered her face, tears streaming freely. She whispered, you did it, baby." Her relief was mingled with lingering fear, the months of terror and sleepless nights finally colliding with the revelation of justice. The judge banged his gavel lightly, struggling to regain composure in the charged room. "Order in the court, order," his voice echoed, though the room remained tense, every ear tuned to the child and her dog. "Prosecutor, your actions have been documented. Your attempts to withhold, manipulate, and distort have been exposed. You are now under the scrutiny of the court and may face charges of obstruction and endangerment. We will proceed with a full review of all your actions." The man's hands shook violently. He tried to argue, to explain, to reclaim control, but Maple's low growl stopped him. The dog's presence was commanding, a physical and psychological barrier against deceit. Every observer could feel the weight of the moment. Words no longer held power, truth did. Maple barked once more, sharp and deliberate. Lily's hand pressed against his fur, steadying herself, drawing strength from his presence. She scribbled another note, trembling, and handed it to the defense attorney. He read it aloud, voice steady. "He tried to hurt me, he lied. We have the proof." The courtroom froze. Deputies instinctively leaned forward, reporters whispered frantically, and the judge's eyes widened. The gravity of a child's unspoken truth, amplified by the unwavering loyalty and instincts of a trained dog, had left no room for denial. The prosecutor sank further into his chair, white as the polished floors, panic radiating from every pore. Dr. Ross stepped forward once again. "Your Honor, the dog's behavior corroborates the child's signals. This is consistent with recognition of danger and deceit. Maple is not acting randomly. He is confirming what the child has communicated in silence for months." The judge exhaled slowly, leaning back. The court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances. The evidence, the signals, and the dog's behavior create an irrefutable narrative of manipulation, attempted endangerment, and deceit. This court will proceed to formally review the prosecutor's conduct and the impact on the case. The prosecutor's hands dropped limply to the table. He stared at Lily and Maple, the realization of his exposure sinking in. The courtroom, once filled with chaos, now held an almost reverent silence. Everyone recognized the incredible courage of a child who had endured trauma and the loyalty of a dog who had amplified her voice when words failed. Elizabeth Harper's sobs were quiet but filled with relief. She looked at her daughter, who pressed her head into Maple's fur. Months of fear, silence, and uncertainty had been transformed into a moment of undeniable triumph. The child's secret signals had finally been understood by the world. Maple nudged Lily gently, tail stiff but reassuring. The courtroom remained tense, but the dog's presence was grounding, a reminder that justice had been amplified by loyalty, intuition, and unspoken communication. The judge's gavel fell, a crisp, definitive sound cutting through the tension. The court acknowledges the extraordinary nature of this evidence and the behavior of the child and her dog. Further proceedings will formally address the prosecutor's actions, and the protection of Miss Harper will be prioritized. Let it be known, truth has been revealed and no deception will go unexamined. The prosecutor finally slumped, his face pale and resigned. Every lie, every omission, every attempt at manipulation had been shattered. The child and her dog had accomplished what many feared impossible, exposing the truth without speaking a single word. Maple barked once more, softly this time, as if signaling the end of immediate danger. Lily rested her head against him, trembling but smiling faintly. The courtroom, still stunned, began to murmur again, recognizing the profound reality of what had transpired. And in that charged silence, everyone knew that the final chapter was approaching, the day when justice would fully unfold, and the child who had survived terror would finally see the consequences of truth triumph over deceit. The courtroom seemed almost unreal, as if suspended in a tense bubble between chaos and resolution. Every seat was filled, every eye glued to the small girl who had, without a single word, orchestrated the exposure of a man's deceit through subtle signals and the unwavering loyalty of her golden retriever. Maple's posture remained vigilant, yet his body relaxed slightly as he sensed the immediate threat had passed. The prosecutor sat slumped, defeated, the weight of exposure pressing on him like an immovable force. Elizabeth Harper's hands trembled as she clutched the edge of her chair. Tears had streaked her face, and yet relief began to wash through her. For months, she had watched her daughter retreat into silence, haunted by the memory of that terrifying night, the night someone had tried to snatch her from their driveway. Every unanswered question, every sleepless night had led to this moment, the truth finally visible and undeniable. The judge cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses, eyes sweeping across the courtroom. This court has witnessed extraordinary circumstances, evidence previously withheld, manipulation by the prosecution, and the silent communication of a minor through her trained dog have all been brought to light. The integrity of these proceedings must now be restored. The prosecutor's face drained of color. His hands shook violently, grasping the edges of the table as though he could hold onto his collapsing world. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Months of planning, rehearsing, and deceit were reduced to nothing in the presence of a child who refused to speak lies and a dog who refused to look away. Dr. Helena Ross stepped forward, speaking with calm authority. "Your Honor, Maple's behavior throughout these proceedings has been deliberate and precise. The signals from Miss Harper are consistent with recognition of danger and deceit. The dog's responses have validated the child's observations and unspoken testimony. This is not conjecture. It is the culmination of months of training and trust between the child and her dog." The judge nodded slowly, his gavel poised above the bench. "Very well. We will proceed to formalize the review of the prosecutor's conduct, examine all withheld evidence, and ensure that justice is served. Miss Harper's testimony, though silent, will be considered central to this case." Maple leaned gently into Lily, who rested her small head against his fur. She had communicated months of fear, terror, and truth without saying a word. The golden retriever had amplified her courage, translating unspoken signals into a force the courtroom could not ignore. Every bark, every growl, every subtle shift in posture had carried meaning, and now the meaning had become reality. Justice would be pursued. Elizabeth Harper exhaled deeply, overwhelmed with gratitude. She had feared that Lily's silence would leave the truth buried, that no one would listen, that the trauma of a single night would remain unresolved. But the child had acted with bravery beyond her years, and Maple had ensured the world understood her message. The defense attorney spoke, presenting a final motion for protective custody and support for Lily, citing both the trauma she had endured and the extraordinary circumstances of the case. "Your Honor, we request immediate measures to safeguard Miss Harper and to ensure the prosecution is fully accountable for actions that endangered a minor and misrepresented critical evidence." The judge's gaze softened slightly as he looked at Lily. She sat quietly, gripping Maple's leash, her golden eyes glistening but resolute. "This court will implement protective measures immediately," he announced. "Additionally, a full investigation into the prosecutor's conduct will follow. It is clear that attempts to obscure the truth will not stand." The prosecutor's face remained ashen, pale and trembling as the implications settled. He realized that the child's courage, amplified by her dog, had dismantled everything he had relied upon, every manipulation, every omission, every lie. The courtroom had witnessed the undeniable truth, and there was no escaping it. Maple's ears twitched as the room shifted, sensing that the immediate danger had passed but that vigilance remained necessary. He nuzzled Lily's hand gently, a quiet reassurance, a reminder that she was no longer alone. She smiled faintly, tears streaming down her cheeks, the weight of fear lifting just enough to allow relief to touch her heart. Elizabeth Harper approached her daughter, hugging her tightly. "You did it, baby," she whispered. "You were so brave." Lily hugged her mother back, feeling the warmth and safety she had longed for over months of anxiety and silence. Maple's tail thumped softly against the floor, a grounding presence amid the lingering tension. The judge banged his gavel, signaling the courtroom to resume order. This court recognizes the extraordinary courage of a minor who has, through nonverbal communication and the assistance of a trained animal, revealed critical truths that might otherwise have been hidden. We acknowledge the bravery of Miss Harper and the invaluable assistance of Maple. Protective measures will be enforced, and justice will proceed accordingly. Whispers of astonishment swept through the gallery. Reporters scrambled to document every detail, but even amidst the frenzy, the focus remained on the child and her dog. The prosecutor slumped in defeat, every attempt at resistance crushed by the combination of silent communication, instinct, and irrefutable evidence. Dr. Ross knelt beside Lily for a moment, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've done something remarkable," she said softly, "not just for yourself, but for anyone who might feel powerless. You and Maple made sure the truth was seen." Lily rested her small hand against Maple's fur, drawing strength from his calm presence. The dog nudged her gently, a gesture of reassurance that only she could understand fully. The bond between them had saved her, not just physically but emotionally, and now it had ensured justice in a way that no words could have accomplished alone. Elizabeth Harper finally allowed herself a small, shaky smile, tears still streaming. "You've been so brave, my love," she whispered again. "You've shown everyone that even the smallest voice can demand to be heard." The judge banged his gavel one final time. "Let it be known that the actions of this child and her dog have been recognized by this court as extraordinary. Protective measures and justice will proceed. Let this be a reminder that truth cannot be silenced, and courage will always find a way to speak, even without words." Maple barked softly once, almost ceremoniously, and Lily smiled faintly, tears slipping down her cheeks. The courtroom, still buzzing with disbelief and awe, began to empty slowly, leaving behind a lingering sense of hope, triumph, and reverence for the unspoken bond between a child and her dog. The prosecutor was escorted out under supervision, a man undone by his own deceit and the remarkable courage of a 3-year-old girl who refused to remain silent, even without speaking a single word. Outside the courtroom, sunlight streamed through the windows. Elizabeth Harper held Lily's hand tightly as they walked together, Maple padding faithfully beside them. The months of fear, trauma, and anxiety had finally given way to a sense of security, justice, and closure. Lily looked down at Maple and whispered softly just for him, "We did it." Maple nudged her gently in return, his golden eyes warm and protective. They had faced fear together, exposed the truth, and changed the course of a courtroom and their lives in ways no one could have imagined. Justice had been served, not through force, not through loud declarations, but through the quiet courage of a child and the unwavering loyalty of a dog who understood every unspoken word. And as they stepped into the sunlight, leaving the tension of the courtroom behind, the world seemed just a little brighter, proof that even in the darkest moments, courage, love, and truth could prevail. The story of Lily and Maple would be remembered, not for the fear endured, but for the bravery displayed, a reminder that sometimes the quietest voices speak the loudest truths.